The axe comes down on green oak. It splits clean. A woman rides out of the pines. Velvet coat, bleeding hands, no gun. She has climbed a mountain nobody sane climbs in November. She has come alone, and she stops 3 feet from a stranger with an axe in his hand. And she says 2 words, and the mountain goes quiet. Down below in a town built on other people's debts, a banker sets his coffee cup in its saucer. A dying woman in a blue upstairs room opens her eyes for the first time in 6 days. A brother who does not yet know his own name
sorry, but I can't
is
go
reading
back there with
poetry
you.
to a woman he thinks is his aunt. A safe behind a picture of ships holds a letter no one has read, and on a ridge above them all, a splinter of oak falls into the snow, and a man who has not been down that mountain in 9 years looks up. The wind on Cathedral Ridge did not sing. It cut. It came down through the black pines like something with a purpose, hunting the pass, hunting the low places, hunting anything soft enough to bruise. And on that ridge, a man named Ezra Blackwood swung an axe into a log of green oak and split it clean. He did not look up when the first sound of hooves reached him. He should have, because riding up his mountain, through a switchback trail no sane woman had any business climbing in November, was a girl of 23 in a burgundy velvet coat that had cost her father more money than Ezra Blackwood had seen in his life. Her hair was coming loose, her horse was foaming, her hands, gripping the reins too tight, were bleeding through her gloves. She had ridden 4 hours, through snow, through wolf country, with no gun. Her name was Rosalind Wexford, and she had come to buy a husband. 6 days earlier, she had knelt at her mother's bedside. The room smelled of camphor and rosewater, and the particular sweetness that clings to a body when the body has decided to leave. Rosalind knew that smell. She had known it since she was 7 years old, and her grandmother had died in the guest bedroom on the 2nd floor. She had known it since her father died 2 months ago in his own study. She was learning it again now. Delphine Wexford could not sit up anymore. She could only turn her face toward the sound of her daughter's voice. "Mama, you're cold." Her mother's hand came out from under the quilt, thin, papery. "Come here." Rosalind put her cheek against her mother's fingers and did not cry. She had promised herself she would not cry. She had made that promise so many times in the last 2 months that it had stopped feeling like a promise and started feeling like a wall she was building, brick by brick, around her own throat. "Mama, I need to tell you something." "Tell me." "The lawyer came today." A pause, her mother's eyes, still hazel, still sharp somewhere behind the fever, tracked slowly across her daughter's face. "Papa's will." "Yes." "He was afraid," Delphine said. "He was always afraid of what would happen if a woman was left alone." "I know." "He didn't know you." Rosalind laughed once. It came out wrong. Half a sob and half a laugh, and all of it exhausted. "He wrote in the will," she said, "that I have to be married before my next birthday, or the estate goes to Winston." Her mother's eyes closed. "When is your birthday, Rosie?" 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Yes. There was a long silence in the room. Outside, somewhere down the hallway, a clock struck 4. The nurse was moving in the kitchen. A servant's boot creaked on the stair. "Sell the house," Delphine whispered. "No." "Sell it." "Rosalind." "No, Mama, no, not this house. You are going to die in this house. You are not going to die in some rented room in town with strangers walking past your door. Do you hear me? You are not." Her mother opened her eyes. "Then you will have to be very brave, child." "I know. Braver than any woman I've raised you to be." "I know." Delphine's hand tightened, just for a second, just enough. "You were always the brave one," she said. "You were the one who climbed the pear tree and would not come down." "I remember." "You climb, Rosalind. You climb until you find something to hold on to." Then she slept. Rosalind sat with her a long time, and in that long time, she thought about the will. She thought about Alistair Crowe, the banker who had already sent 2 letters offering to marry her. She thought about the way he looked at her mother's rings. She thought about her cousin Winston, who was drunk by breakfast, who would sign away the entire Wexford estate to Crowe by supper if he ever got hold of it. She thought about all the men in Ridgewater, who would gladly put a ring on her finger and a knife in the back of everything her father had built. And she thought about a name her father had said once, over brandy, on a night when he thought she wasn't listening. There is one man in this county who won't take Crowe's money. He lives on Cathedral Ridge. His name is Blackwood. Ridgewater in November was a mean little town. It had the money of a boom town, but the soul of a graveyard. The main street ran from the bank on the north end to the church on the south end, and everything between belonged to Alistair Crowe. The general store, the livery, the hotel with the green shutters, the saloon behind the hotel, the undertaker across from the saloon. Crowe did not own their deeds outright. He owned their debts, which was the same thing, only quieter. Rosalind rode down Main Street the next morning in a black wool dress and a black wool cloak, in a face that told the world nothing. She stopped at the lawyer's office first. Josiah Thackeray had been her father's attorney for 30 years. He was thin, he was gray, he wore spectacles that had been repaired twice with wire, and he was terrified of her. "Miss Wexford." "Josiah, you should not be out, not in this weather, not—" "I need to see the will again. I read it to you yesterday." "Read it again?" He read it again. She listened, and when he was finished, she asked him the question she had come to ask. "Does it specify who I marry?" Josiah's hand froze halfway to his teacup. "I beg your pardon." "Does the will specify that I must marry a man of a certain station, a certain wealth, a certain reputation, a certain name?" Well, no, Miss Wexford, it does not. So any legal marriage will satisfy the condition. In theory, yes, but Miss Wexford, surely you don't— "Thank you, Josiah." She stood up. "Miss Wexford, please, whatever you are thinking, please consider—" "I have considered. Mr. Crowe was here yesterday." She paused at the door. "What did he want?" He said if you had not made your choice by Sunday, he would be very disappointed." Rosalind turned around, slowly. "Josiah?" "Yes. When my father hired you, what did he pay you to do?" He paid me to protect the family's legal interests." "Then protect them." She left. The next stop was harder. Her cousin Winston lived in the west wing of the Wexford mansion. He had lived there since he was 17, and his mother, Rosalind's aunt, had died of consumption. He was 31 now. He drank 2 bottles of bourbon a day and cried in the mornings and pretended not to remember any of it by afternoon. She found him on the sun porch, staring at the frozen garden, with a glass in his hand. "Winston." "Rosie." "Look at me." He looked at her. His eyes were red. His collar was undone. He smelled like a barrel that had been left out in the rain. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to remember, in the morning, what I say now. Can you do that?" I can try." "No, don't try. Do it." He set the glass down. "I'm going away for a day," she said. "Maybe 2. I want you to sit with Mama while I'm gone. I want you to read to her from the blue book on her nightstand, the one with the ribbon in it. Do you remember which one that is?" The poems." "Yes. She used to read them to me when I was small, when my mother— I know she did." His face crumpled. He was 31 years old, and his face crumpled like a child's. And Rosalind, who had told herself all morning she would not feel anything today, felt something she did not have a name for, pity or love. or something older than either. You are my family, she said quietly. Whatever else happens, whatever you have done, you are my family. Do you hear me? Rosie, sit with her, read to her. That is all I am asking. I will. Say it. I will sit with her. I will read to her. Good. She kissed the top of his head and left. Then she went to the livery and asked for the fastest horse they had. Cathedral Ridge is not a mountain a woman climbs in a velvet dress. She knew this. She had known it before she saddled the mare, but she was not going to ride up that mountain in a work skirt, because the man at the top of the mountain, whoever he was, needed to see exactly who she was. Not a farm girl, not a woman in disguise, a Wexford, riding her father's best horse. In the coat her father had bought her the winter before he died, with her mother's cameo pinned at her throat. She wanted him to see the Wexford of Ridgewater, because she was about to ask that man to save her. The trail was worse than she had been told. By the second hour, she was bleeding through her gloves. By the third hour, the mare was slipping on wet shale and Rosalind had dismounted twice to lead her over the worst stretches. By the fourth hour, the pines had thickened around her, and the sky above the pines had gone the color of a bruise, and the wind had come down off the ridge with a sound she had never heard before in her life. Something was tracking her. She heard the paws on frozen leaves at one point, off to her right, and she did not turn her head. She kept riding. She kept her hand on the reins. She kept her spine straight. Because turning her head would have been the same as admitting she was afraid, and she was not going to admit she was afraid. Not to the mountain, not to whatever was following her, and not to herself. She rode, and then the trees opened, and there was a clearing, and a log cabin with smoke coming from the chimney, and a woodpile taller than the cabin, and a man in a canvas coat standing beside the woodpile with an axe in his hand and a dog at his heel, watching her ride out of the pines like she was something he had not decided yet whether to shoot. She reined the mare to a stop. She swung herself down. Her boots hit the ground, and her knees buckled. She caught herself on the stirrup. She did not fall. She would not fall. She straightened. She took one breath. She walked across the clearing on legs that felt like paper, and she stopped 3 feet from the man with the axe, and she looked him in the eye. Ezra Blackwood. He did not answer. You are Ezra Blackwood, aren't you? I might be. My name is Rosalind Wexford. I know who you are. Good. She swallowed. Her mouth was dry. Her throat was closing. She had rehearsed this on the ride up, and she had lost every word. So she just said it. Marry me. He looked at her a long time. He did not laugh. He did not blink. He reached up, slowly, and pulled a splinter of oak from his beard and flicked it into the snow. No. That was all he said. No. The word landed like a slap. She had prepared for laughter. She had prepared for questions. She had prepared for suspicion, for insult, for a rifle raised in her direction. She had not prepared for the flat, uninterested, one-word refusal of a man who did not seem to think she was worth 2 seconds of his time. You haven't heard my offer. Don't need to. $5,000. Don't need it. Every man needs $5,000. Not this one. He picked up the axe again and swung. The oak split with a crack that echoed off the ridge. She stood there. She stood there in her ruined velvet coat, with her bleeding hands and her frozen face, and her hair coming down around her shoulders in slow dark strands. And she watched him work, and she thought, no, no, I did not come up this mountain to be dismissed. Mr. Blackwood. He did not look at her. My mother is dying. He paused, just a fraction, just enough that she saw the axe hover, and then come down again. My mother is dying, she said again, and her voice did not shake, and she did not know how it did not shake. She has 3 weeks, maybe 4. If Alistair Crow takes my father's estate, he will put my mother in a poorhouse. She will die in a bed that is not hers, in a room that smells of other women's sickness, with strangers listening to her last breath. I will not let that happen. He set the axe down. That's a hard story, Miss Wexford. It's not a story. That's true. It's not. But it's still not my business. I am making it your business. You can't. I can because you are the only man in this county Alistair Crow cannot buy, and I need a husband who cannot be bought. There are other men. None? There are. Not one. He turned his head. He looked at her fully for the first time. His eyes were dark and set deep, and there was something in them she did not know how to read. Miss Wexford. Yes, I have not been down that mountain in 9 years. I know. I have not put my name on a piece of paper in 12. I know. I don't do business with Ridgewater, and I don't do business with the Wexfords. Her breath caught. What did you say? You heard me. What did you say about the Wexfords? He did not answer. He picked up the axe, he turned his back to her, he split the next log, and Rosalind Wexford, 23 years old, bleeding through her gloves, standing in a clearing in the snow with the last of her strength ebbing out of her legs, understood something she had not understood before. He knew her name. He had known her name before she said it. He had been carrying her name up here on this mountain for a long time, and there was something in him that did not like the sound of it. She did not know what that meant, but she was going to find out. Mr. Blackwood? Miss Wexford. I will wait. You'll what? I will wait. I will stand right here. I will stand on that porch. I will sit on those steps. I will sleep in the snow. I will not leave this clearing until you agree. He turned around. Miss Wexford. Yes. It's going to be 20 degrees tonight. I know. You will freeze. Then I will freeze. You are not serious. Look at my face, Joe. He looked at her face. He looked at it for a long time. And whatever he saw there, it made him tighten his jaw and turn his head to the side and mutter something under his breath that she could not hear. Then he picked up the axe and he walked into the cabin and he shut the door behind him. She sat on the top step. The dog, a big scarred hound with half of one ear missing, watched her from the corner of the porch. He did not growl. He did not come near her. He just sat there and watched. The way a creature watches something it has not yet decided about. The sun went down. The temperature dropped. She pulled her knees up under her cloak, and she pressed her back against the log wall of the cabin. And she thought about her mother in the blue room, listening to Winston reading from the poetry book. And she thought, just get through tonight. Just get through tonight and he will have to say yes. The wind came up. The snow started. She could not feel her feet by 10 o'clock. She could not feel her hands by midnight. At some point she must have slept, because she woke, and the sky had that dead gray color that comes just before dawn, and she was still alive. She was still alive. She almost laughed, because the cabin door opened behind her, and she heard boots on the porch, and a heavy wool blanket dropped over her shoulders, and a voice said, low and rough, "You are the stubbornest damn woman I have ever seen." She did not turn around. Does that mean yes? It means come inside before you lose a foot. She stood. Her legs shook so hard she nearly fell. He caught her arm. His hand was hot through the wool of her sleeve. He steered her through the door of the cabin, and there was a fire already going, and a tin cup on the table with steam rising off it. And the dog looked up from the hearth and thumped his tail against the floor once. He sat her down at the table. He wrapped the blanket tighter around her. He put the cup in her hands. Drink. What is it? Coffee. I don't like coffee. Drink. She drank. It was black. It was bitter. It was so hot it burned her tongue. And she did not care, because it was warm going down her throat, and warm going into her chest. And she could feel her ribs unclench for the first time in 6 days. He sat down across from her. He watched her drink, and when she set the cup down, he said, very quietly, $5,000. Yes. Signed to a bank in Denver, not Ridgewater. Yes. I sleep by the fire, you sleep in the town. We are married on paper, nowhere else. Yes. When your mother, he stopped. He looked at the fire. When your mother passes, bless her, we petition for annulment, and I go back up this mountain, and I never see your face again. Yes. You understand what you're asking. I understand. You understand what Crow will do to me. She looked at him. You are Ezra Blackwood, she said. You have not been down that mountain in 9 years. What could Alistair Crow possibly do to you that has not already been done? Something moved behind his eyes. Something old. Something she did not understand yet. Miss Wexford. Yes. You have a sharp tongue. I know. It's going to get you into trouble. Probably. He almost smiled. For half a second, the corner of his mouth, then it was gone, and he stood up, and he took the empty coffee cup, and he walked to the door. Rest, he said. We ride at first light. It is first light. Then rest for an hour. I can ride now. Miss Wexford. Yes. You have not slept in a bed in 3 days. How do you know? Because I have not slept in a bed in 9 years, and I know what it looks like. She swallowed. She lay down on the pine floor by the fire, wrapped in his blanket, and she did not remember closing her eyes. She slept. Ridgewater watched them come down. The whole town watched. Word had traveled ahead of them somehow, the way word always does in a small place. By the time Rosalind Wexford and Ezra Blackwood rode down the last switchback into the north end of Main Street, there were faces at every window, faces on every porch. The blacksmith stopped hammering. The washerwoman set her basket down. 2 boys who had been chasing a hoop stopped in the middle of the street and stared. Rosalind rode with her head high. Her hair was combed. Her face was pale but composed. She had washed the blood off her hands at the creek and pulled her gloves back over the scabs. She looked like exactly what she was, a Wexford, come home to claim what was hers. Ezra rode half a pace behind her. He wore the same canvas coat, the same wool hat, the same rifle across his knee. But there was something different about the way he sat the horse now, a watchfulness, a calm, like a man who had already decided how the next 5 minutes were going to go and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. Alistair Crow stepped into the street in front of the bank. He was tall, he was pressed, he had a silver-top walking stick and a coat that had been cut for him in St. Louis, and he stepped into the middle of Main Street and raised one hand, and Rosalind's mare stopped without being asked. Rosalind? Alistair. Where, he said, very carefully, have you been? None of your affair. Oh, he said, I think it is very much my affair. He looked past her. He looked at Ezra. He looked at Ezra for a long time. His face went white, then red, then a color Rosalind did not have a name for. Blackwood. Ezra did not answer. Blackwood, you come off that mountain. Silence. Blackwood, I asked you a question. You didn't. Crow's jaw worked. Get off that horse, both of you. Get off those horses and go home. Rosalind, this is a mistake. You are grieving. You have made a... I am going to the magistrate's office. Crow's face changed again. Rosalind, I am going to be married today. Now, step out of the road. Rosalind, listen to me. This man is not... Step out of the road, Alistair. He is not a man for a Wexford daughter. He is a hermit. He lives with a dog. 12 years ago, he stood in this very street and put down 2 men who came for his family. You may have forgotten that. This town has not. You will not put your father's name on a marriage certificate next to... Ezra's horse moved. It was not a big movement. Just a step forward. Just enough that the animal's shoulder brushed Crow's coat. and Crow took a step back before he knew he was going to. Ezra leaned down from the saddle. He did not raise his voice. He said, very quietly, 3 words, "Move, or I will." Crow moved. Rosalind did not look at him as she rode past. She did not have to. The magistrate's office was on the 2nd floor above the general store. It smelled of ink and pipe smoke and the peculiar dust that gathers in rooms where paperwork lives. Magistrate Culpepper was a small man with a large mustache and a nervous tremor in his left hand. And when the door opened and Rosalind Wexford walked in with Ezra Blackwood behind her, he nearly dropped his pen. "Miss Wexford." "Magistrate, I was not expecting." "I know." She stepped up to his desk. She drew off her gloves. She set a small leather purse on the wood, and it made a heavy sound, the sound of gold, and Culpepper's tremor got worse. "We need a license," she said, "and we need you to perform the ceremony now." "Miss Wexford, this is highly irregular. Perhaps you should return tomorrow when you have now." "But Magistrate Culpepper." She leaned across his desk. Her voice dropped. "My father made you a rich man in the Panic of '73. He carried your paper when the bank would not. He wrote you into his will as a beneficiary for a sum I have here in my ledger and can produce in the next 5 minutes if you require me to. Do you require me to?" Culpepper's mustache trembled. "No, Miss Wexford." "Then find your ledger." He found his ledger. He fumbled with the pen. He knocked over his inkwell and cursed under his breath and caught it before it spilled. He wrote Cathedral County, Territory of Colorado, November the 17th, 1887 in a shaking hand across the top of the marriage record. The bride's full legal name. Rosalind took the pen. She wrote. In a steady hand, Rosalind Delphine Wexford. She set the pen down. She did not see, because she was not looking, that Ezra Blackwood had gone very still behind her. Culpepper cleared his throat. And the groom's Ezra Blackwood. His voice was strange. Rosalind looked up. Ezra was looking at the ledger. He was looking at the ledger the way a man looks at something he thought he had buried a long time ago and just found sitting on his kitchen table. "Mr. Blackwood." He did not answer. "Mr. Blackwood, are you Delphine?" "What?" He looked at her. His face was different. "Your mother's name is Delphine." "Yes." "Delphine Wexford." "Yes." "What was her maiden name?" Rosalind blinked. "Sinclair, why?" He closed his eyes just for a second. Just for one long second. Standing there in the magistrate's office in his canvas coat with his wool hat in his hand. Ezra Blackwood closed his eyes. And Rosalind Wexford, who had thought she understood every part of the transaction she was making, understood that she did not understand this part at all. He opened his eyes. He picked up the pen. He signed his name. Ezra Aaron Blackwood. Slow, deliberate, like a man swearing an oath he had not known he owed. Culpepper watched. Rosalind watched. And when Ezra set the pen down, he looked at her, and his voice was low and rough and something in it had come loose. "Miss Wexford?" "Yes." "When we're done here, when we leave this office, I need to speak to your mother." "My mother is dying, Mr. Blackwood." "I know." "She cannot receive callers." "I know." "Then why?" He looked at her, and what she saw in his face, in that moment, was not the closed, hard face of the mountain man who had told her no the day before. It was the face of a man who had been carrying something for 20 years and had just been told he could set it down. "Because," he said, "I owe her a debt." Culpepper pronounced them husband and wife in a shaking voice. Neither of them heard him. They walked out into the November light. The town was still watching. Crow was gone from the street, but his men were there. 3 of them by the bank, 1 by the livery, all of them pretending to be doing something else. Ezra saw them. Rosalind saw him seeing them. Neither of them spoke about it. He helped her into the saddle. She rode beside him back toward the Wexford mansion on the rise above town. And halfway there, on the long straight stretch where the road ran through the elms, she said, without looking at him, "Mr. Blackwood, Miss Wexford, you knew my mother." He did not answer for a long time. "I did." "How?" "That's not for me to say." "It is my mother." "It is your mother's story, not mine." "Mr. Blackwood, Miss Wexford, I have just married you. I am aware. I have signed a contract with a stranger, and now I am learning that the stranger is not a stranger, and you are telling me it is not for you to say." He pulled his horse up. She pulled up beside him. They sat there in the road, in the pale afternoon light, in the cold that had followed them down off the mountain. And he looked at her, and he said, "She saved my brother's life when I was 14. Ask her the rest. She has earned the right to tell it." The words landed heavy. Rosalind sat very still on the mare. The wind moved in the elms. The mare shifted under her, somewhere in the distance, down in the town. A bell was ringing for Mr. Blackwood, Miss Wexford. "Take me home." Yes, they rode. The mansion rose up above them on the ridge as the light was going down. The tall windows caught the last of the sun. The wrought iron gate stood open, the way they had stood open all her life. And Rosalind Wexford, 23 years old, married for less than an hour to a man she had known for 19 hours, rode through those gates with a stranger who was not a stranger, and understood that the story she had thought she was writing was not the story she was in. She was in a much older story. She was in a story her mother had started 20 years ago. And her mother, upstairs in the blue room, was about to finish it. Mrs. Prudence Ainsworth was waiting at the door. She was 70 years old, and she wore her black dress, and her white apron, and her iron gray hair pulled back into the same tight knot she had worn since Rosalind was a child. She did not look surprised to see Ezra Blackwood standing on the front step. She looked at him for a long moment, and something moved in her face, something that Rosalind had never seen there before. "Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Ainsworth, you've come." "I have. She has been waiting for you." Rosalind's head turned. "She... what?" Mrs. Ainsworth's eyes were wet. "Come inside, Rosie, both of you. Come inside now. Your mother is upstairs. She is not asleep. She said this morning that you would bring him home today." "She said what?" "Come inside, child. Come inside." Rosalind climbed the steps. Ezra followed. The door closed behind them. And upstairs, in the blue room, with the last light of the afternoon coming in through the tall windows, Delphine Wexford opened her eyes and turned her face toward the sound of her daughter's footsteps on the stair. And she smiled for the first time in 6 days. The blue room smelled of camphor and rose water and something else now, something Rosalind had not noticed before. Pine sap, wood smoke, the mountain. He carried it in on his coat. Delphine turned her head on the pillow. Her eyes found him, and they held. "Ezra." "Ma'am?" "Come closer, child. I can't see you." He was 34 years old, and she called him child. And he crossed the blue room in 3 strides and knelt beside her bed like a boy summoned to a schoolmistress. And he took the hand she offered him, and he held it, and he did not let go. "You grew up." "Yes, ma'am. You look like your father." "So I've been told." "Elijah, he lived." "I know." "You know?" "I always knew." "Ezra, a mother knows when a child of hers lives, even a child who was not born to her." Rosalind stood in the doorway with her hand pressed against the frame, because she thought if she let go of the frame, she would fall. 20 years. 20 years of a woman who read her poetry at bedtime and taught her to press flowers and never once, not once, said a word about a boy on a mountain she had ridden through the snow to save. Rosalind's whole life, rearranging itself in the space of one held hand. Mama. Delphine's eyes moved. Come here, Rosie. She came. She knelt beside Ezra, on the other side of the bed, and her mother's other hand came out from under the quilt and found her face, and Rosalind pressed her cheek into that thin, papery palm, and finally, let herself cry. I should have told you, Delphine whispered. Mama. I should have told you 100 times, and every time I opened my mouth, your father, Papa didn't know. Your father knew, Rosie. Rosalind lifted her head. He knew. He drove me up that mountain. Sit down, child, sit down. I do not have long, and there is a piece of this Ezra does not know. And I need to say it once, and I need you both here when I say it. She said it. Not the whole story. Ezra already had the whole story. He had lived it. He had been 14 years old on a floor at the foot of his brother's cot. He knew about the black wool coat and the bread and the 3 nights and the fever breaking on the 3rd morning. What he did not know was what came after. Delphine told him what came after. Your father, she said, and her eyes were on Ezra. Cornelius, he met me at the door when I rode down that mountain. He did not shout. He did not weep. He put his hands over mine until they were warm, and he made me promise never to ride up alone again. And I did not. Not because I was obedient, because he found a better way. Ezra's head lifted. Ma'am, the bank foreclosed on your mules that November. Ezra, do you remember? I remember. Your farm followed in the spring. I remember, ma'am. You never learned who bought the deed back for your mother, did you? No, ma'am. He did, Cornelius, through 3 separate men in 3 separate towns, so that Crow's father would never trace it to a Wexford. He gave the deed to a lawyer in Denver in trust, to be returned to your mother on her signature, which she gave, without ever knowing whose hand had passed it back to her. Ezra was very still. Rosalind was very still. Papa, Rosalind said, very quietly. Papa did that. Papa did that. He never told me. He never told anyone. Rosalind. It is in his private ledger, behind the picture of the ships, in the safe in the study, under a false company name. He thought, if he lived long enough, he would find a way to tell you both, without endangering the boys, or you, or me. And then, well, then his heart stopped. Rosalind sat back on her heels, because her father, her hard, cold father with the steel spectacles and the hand that had never once touched her cheek in tenderness, her father who had loved his ledgers more than his family, or so she had believed her whole life. Her father had spent his last quiet years secretly, silently, buying back a mountain for 2 boys he had never met, and nobody had known, not her, not the town, not the boys themselves. Mr. Blackwood. Ezra's face was wet. She had not known his face could be wet. Ma'am, look after her when I'm gone. Ma'am, Say yes, Ezra. Yes, ma'am. Say it clear. I will look after her, ma'am. On my name. Good. Delphine's eyes closed. Rosie. Mama. I'm going to sleep now. Yes. When I wake, read to me from the blue book. Yes. The one Winston has been reading. Yes. You will not send Winston away. No. You will love him, Rosie. Yes. He is your family. I know he is my family, Mama. You do not know all of it. Rosalind's face changed. Mama. Sleep. Later. Ask Reverend Wickham about Winston when I am gone, not before. Mama. Sleep now. She slept. Ezra Blackwood stayed in the West Wing that night, in a guest room the size of his whole cabin. He did not sleep in the bed. He unrolled his wool blanket on the floor beside it and laid his rifle within reach. And the dog, Ash, curled at his feet on the imported Persian rug and stayed awake all night. Because Ash could feel it too. Because dogs can always feel it. The bad thing coming. The bad thing came the next morning. It came in the form of two men. They did not come to the front door. They came to the back, where the servants received deliveries, where a young stable boy named Jem was carrying in a load of firewood at 7 in the morning. And they came with a paper, and they said the paper was from the bank, and the paper said the Wexford estate had a lien against it, and the lien was being called, and the sum due was $37,000, payable in 7 days, or the bank would begin proceedings to seize the mansion, the mill, the grazing land, and the water rights. Jem carried the paper to Mrs. Ainsworth. Mrs. Ainsworth carried it to Rosalind. Rosalind carried it, 20 minutes later, into the West Wing library, where Ezra Blackwood was standing at the window with a cup of coffee, watching the town. She dropped the paper on the table. "Read that." He read it. He set the coffee down. "How much cash do you have on hand?" $416. "That's it. That's it. Where's the rest?" "In the bank." "His bank." "His bank." He looked at her. "Miss Wexford." "Yes. I have never in my life met a woman who could hold this many bad cards at once and still play them." She almost laughed. Then she did not laugh, because Ezra Blackwood had walked to the window and put his palm against the glass, and she saw him do the math in his head, the way a man does when the numbers do not work and the numbers have to work anyway. "The mill. What about it? How many men?" 60. Payroll. 1,200 a week. How long has it been since he froze your accounts? 2 days. So Friday. So Friday. He is going to time the payroll strike for Friday. He is going to make sure your mill workers walk out. He is going to have them all rehired at his own yards by Monday. He is going to have your railroad contract in default by Wednesday. And he is going to have your land in court by Friday next. Yes, he has done this before. Not to me. To someone. Ezra turned around. To my mother. Rosalind said nothing, because that was not the story her mother had told. That was another story, and there had not been time. There would never be time now. "Miss Wexford." "Yes." "The $400. In the house." "Where?" "In the safe." "Get it." "Why?" "Because I am going to the mill." "With $400? "No." He reached into his coat. He pulled out a leather belt. He set it on the table. It clinked when it landed, and Rosalind looked at it, and she knew before she looked what it was. "That is your fee." "That was my fee." "Ezra." "Rosalind." It was the first time she had said his name, and the first time he had said hers, and neither of them noticed, because there was no time to notice. "You cannot spend your fee on my mill. It is not your mill anymore. It is my mill, as of yesterday. I signed a piece of paper, Miss Wexford. Have you forgotten? That is not what I meant. That is what it means. Ezra, get the 400 or don't. Either way, I am writing to the mill." She got the 400. She put it in his hand. He counted it, put it in his coat, buckled the belt around his waist under his coat, whistled for the dog, and walked out the front door of the Wexford mansion without a hat, because he had left his hat in the guest room. And Rosalind, standing at the tall window on the landing, watched him ride down the drive on his big roan horse, with Ash trotting at the heel, and felt something inside her chest do something it had not done in a long time. It was not gratitude. She did not have a name for it yet. She turned away from the window. She went to find her mother. The mill was not what he had expected. He had expected sullen men, men leaning against the fence, men with their arms crossed, men who would negotiate. Instead, he found nothing. The saws were silent. The steam engine was cold. The yard was empty. There was one man in the foreman's shack. A man Ezra remembered. Barely. A man named Muldoon. Muldoon had been a boy at the same schoolhouse Ezra had briefly attended. 3 winters. Before his father died, and school became a luxury the Blackwood family could not afford. Muldoon looked up when the door opened. He did not look surprised. Blackwood. Muldoon. You come to fire me. I come to hire you. You already hired me 10 years ago when Wexford bought the mill. I come to hire you again. Different terms. There ain't a payroll. There is now. Ezra unbuckled the belt, slower this time, because the room was small and Muldoon was watching, and Muldoon was going to remember this, and Ezra wanted him to remember it right. He set the belt on the desk. He opened it. $2,300 in gold, plus $400 in paper. Muldoon whistled. Blackwood. Wherein doesn't matter. That's my payroll. That's your payroll, plus a bonus, to every man who shows up tomorrow morning at 6 with an axe and a working set of hands. How much bonus? $10 a man. 10. 10 for showing up. For showing up and for staying until Christmas. Muldoon leaned back in his chair. He looked at Ezra a long time. You know what Crow is going to do to you. I have some idea. You know what he did to your mother. Ezra's face did not move, but something behind it did. Muldoon. Yeah, you knew my mother. Everyone knew your mother, Ezra. I was on the road the day they carried her down. Muldoon? Yeah. I need those men in this yard at 6 tomorrow morning. You'll have them. You are sure. Blackwood. I am 62 years old. I have not once, in my whole life, turned down a man offering me $10 for keeping a promise I already meant to keep. Then keep it. I will. Ezra stood. He was almost out the door when Muldoon said, quietly, Blackwood. Yes. Your mother made me a pot of stew once. When my first wife died, I was 23. I was drunker than a preacher's mule, and she came up the hill in a blue dress, and she made me a pot of stew, and she sat with me until I could eat. Ezra did not turn around. She did that for a lot of people. She did that for me. I know. I owe. So do I. The saws started at 6 the next morning. They started so loud they could be heard in town. Alistair Crow, who had been having his breakfast served on the porch of the hotel with the green shutters, because he liked to watch the town wake up, set his coffee cup down, slowly, in the saucer, and turned his head toward the sound. He did not smile. He said, to no one in particular, well. He folded his napkin. He walked back to the bank. By 9 o'clock, he had drafted 3 telegrams to 3 different men in 3 different cities. And by 10 o'clock, 2 of those men were on trains heading toward Ridgewater. By 10:30, he had sent a boy up to the Wexford mansion with a letter. The letter said, Rosalind, reconsider. Alistair. Rosalind read it in the front hall. She did not answer it. She burned it in the fireplace. She spent the rest of the morning with her mother. Delphine drifted. She was in and out. Sometimes she was 26 years old and back in the black wool coat. Sometimes she was 50 and sitting in the garden with Cornelius. Sometimes she was very young and calling out to her own mother in a room Rosalind had never seen. But once, in a clear moment, she reached for Rosalind's hand and she said, Winston. Mama. Winston is your brother. Rosalind's whole body went still. What? He is your father's son. Rosie, not your uncle's. Your father's. His mother. My friend. Was our housemaid before I married. Cornelius did what men did, and then he did what men rarely do. He kept the boy. He raised him. He let his sister raise him as her own. And she died, and Winston came to us, and we never told him. Mama. Reverend Whitcomb knows. He baptized the boy. He has the records. Mama. Papa carried this. All his life, it killed him. Rosie. It was not his heart. It was what the heart was carrying. Mama. Do not tell Winston. Yet. When? When it is safe, not before. Do you understand, Rosalind? I understand. Promise. I promise. Delphine's eyes closed. Rosalind sat there, her mother's hand in hers, and she thought, this morning I did not know my father was a good man. This afternoon I do not know if my father was a good man. He kept Winston, but he lied to me about him for 22 years. He saved Ezra's family, but he did it in secret because he was afraid. My father was afraid. My father, who was afraid of nothing, was afraid of Alistair Crow. What did Crow do to my father? What is he going to do to me? The knock came at 3 in the afternoon. It was Reverend Whitcomb. He was a small, round man of about 60, with white hair and blue eyes that had gone milky at the edges, and a black coat that had been brushed twice a day for 30 years. He had baptized Rosalind. He had married her mother and father. He was going to bury her mother inside the month. Mrs. Ainsworth showed him into the parlor. Rosalind poured him tea. He watched her pour. Rosalind, Reverend. Your father wrote me a letter 2 weeks before he died. Her hands shook on the teapot. He said if anything happened to him, and if you ever asked me about your cousin Winston, I was to tell you the truth. She set the teapot down. My mother has already told me. I see. Winston is my brother. He is. My father's son. Yes. By his housemaid, whose name was Elena. Elena what? Elena Marsh. She died in 1856, in childbed. She was 19. Rosalind put her hands flat on the tea table, because the room was moving. Reverend, yes, child. There is something else, isn't there? He did not answer right away. He set his teacup down. He looked at his hands. Rosalind, your father's heart did not fail him on its own. She did not move. She did not speak. She waited. Because inside her chest, something was happening she did not have a name for. Something rising. Something that had been rising for weeks. Something she had refused. Refused. Refused to look at. Because if she looked at it, she was going to have to be a different person for the rest of her life. And she did not know if she could stand to be that person. Alistair Crow. Rosalind. Alistair Crow caused my father's death. Rosalind. He caused it. Not with his hands. Child. Then how? He came to your father's study on the 17th of September, he said, in front of witnesses, that he knew about Winston. He said, if your father did not sign over the water rights to the ranch land, he would publish the story. He would ruin Elena Marsh's name. He would ruin Winston's name. He would ruin your mother. And he would ruin you. And Papa said, your father said he needed a night to think. And that night your father wrote 3 letters, one to me, one to his lawyer, and one to you, which is still, as far as I know, in the safe in his study, which you have not opened. I have not opened it. Then open it, Rosalind. She stood up. She walked to the window. She looked down at the frozen garden, at the path where her father had walked, at the bench where they had found him, sitting up, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes closed, like a man who had chosen his own last minute, instead of waiting for it to be chosen for him. Reverend, yes. He chose, didn't he? He was quiet a long moment. Rosalind, what the doctor said at the grave was true. His heart stopped. But there are things a heart carries that another man can put there. A blackmailer can. A frightened father can. And your father was carrying more than most men can carry. And he chose the hour. And he chose it so that Crow could not carry it any further. Because a living man can be threatened. A living man's family can be threatened. And he loved you. Rosie, He loved you and Winston and your mother more than his own next morning. Her hand went to her mouth. Reverend Rosalind, he gave up his tomorrow so we could have ours. He did. She sat down on the window seat. She did not cry. She was past crying. She was into something else now. A cold place. A very quiet place. The kind of quiet that comes after every soft thing inside a person has been burned out. She sat there a long time. Reverend Whitcomb sat with her. He did not speak. He did not offer her platitudes. He was a good man, and a good man knows when a woman does not need words. At last she said, very quietly, Reverend, yes, child, I am going to end him. Rosalind, I am going to end Alistair Crowe. I am going to end him without a bullet. I am going to end him in front of this town, so that everyone who ever laughed behind their hand about my father, or about Elena Marsh, or about Winston, or about my mother, or about a mountain man with a canvas coat, will remember, on Sunday, the day I ended him. Rosalind, I need you to bring me the baptismal records. I have them. You have them here. I brought them. You expected this. Your father wrote a letter, Rosalind. He was very specific. He reached into his coat. He pulled out a folded packet of papers. He set it on the table between them. Everything is here. The baptism, the signed affidavit of Elena's older sister, the names of 2 witnesses still living, your father's own written acknowledgement of paternity, dated 15 years ago, notarized, and filed with a lawyer in Denver, not Josiah, a different one, so that Crow could never touch it. She stared at the papers. She did not touch them. Reverend, yes. I want you to send a message, in the morning, to every person of any consequence in this town, every merchant, every farm owner, every widow, every preacher of every congregation. I want them at this house, Sunday afternoon, 2 o'clock, after the last service. For what? For the reading of my father's true will. Rosalind, I am going to read Winston into the family, in front of all of them. I am going to acknowledge my brother, and Alistair Crowe, whom I will also invite, personally, will have nothing left to blackmail me with, because there will be nothing left to hide. Rosalind, that is what? That is very brave. It is not brave. It is. It is what my father should have done 15 years ago. If he had, he would still be here. Rosalind, bring the letter. Reverend, which letter? The one in the safe, the one you said he wrote to me. You have not opened the safe. I do not have the combination. Rosalind, yes. He gave it to your mother. She closed her eyes. She stood up. She walked out of the parlor, up the stairs, down the hall, into the blue room, where her mother was awake, watching the window, watching the last of the afternoon light on the frost. Mama, Rosie, the safe, behind the picture of the ships, in your father's study. The combination, 3, 14, 1864. What is that? Her mother turned her head and smiled faintly. The day I met your father. Rosalind went down to the study. She lifted the picture of the ships. She turned the dial. 3, 14, 64. It clicked and clicked and clicked, and the little iron door swung open, and inside was a stack of papers and a letter with her name on it in her father's handwriting. She took the letter to the window. She opened it, and she read what her father had written to her on the last night of his life. She read it standing up, and then she read it sitting down, because her legs did not work anymore. And she read it a third time, slowly, and she folded it, and she put it in the pocket of her dress, against her heart, where it stayed for the rest of that day, and for many days after. She did not tell anyone what it said, not yet. Ezra came home at dusk. He came home smelling of wood smoke, and pine, and sweat, and gunpowder. because he had fired a warning shot at some men on the mill road who had come around asking questions and would not leave when asked politely. He came in through the back kitchen. Mrs. Ainsworth handed him a plate of cold meat and hot potatoes. He ate standing up. Ash sat by his knee. Then he walked into the parlor. Rosalind was sitting by the fire. She was holding a folded letter in her lap. She was not crying, but her face was different. Ezra? Yes? Sit down. He sat down. There will be a gathering here, Sunday afternoon, 2 o'clock. Everyone of any importance in this town. Reverend Whitcomb will announce it in the morning. For what? For the reading of my Father's true will. There is a true one. There is, and there is a brother of mine who does not know he is my brother. And there is a banker who does not know what is coming. And there is a mountain man, whom I married 2 days ago, who is going to stand beside me on Sunday, if he is willing. He looked at her. He did not speak for a long moment. Then he said, Rosalind. Yes. You are not the woman who rode up my mountain 3 days ago. No. Who are you now? She looked at him. The fire moved on her face. I am my father's daughter, she said. I am my mother's daughter, and I am the last Wexford in Ridgewater. And on Sunday, Ezra Blackwood, I am going to walk into my own dining room, and I am going to tell the truth, and I am going to see who is still standing when the truth is finished. He nodded, slowly. I will be beside you. I know. You did not need to ask. I know that too. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind came down off Cathedral Ridge, and the first hard snow of the year began to fall on Ridgewater. And in the West Wing, Winston Wexford, who did not yet know he was a Wexford, was sitting by his aunt's bedside, reading her the poem about the road not taken, in a voice that trembled only a little, because he was 3 days sober now, and he was afraid, and he did not know why he was reading, and he did not know why he could not stop. He did not know that on Sunday, his whole life was going to change. He did not know that a woman on a mountain 20 years ago, and a father who had chosen a bench in a frozen garden, and a mother who had smiled for the first time in 6 days, were about to give him something no one had ever given him before. A name, a real one, his. Sunday came slow. Sunday came the way slow things come, the way winter light comes through a tall window, the way a clock ticks in a room where a woman is dying. Rosalind woke at 4 in the morning. She did not stay in bed, because staying in bed meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering, and remembering meant her father's letter, and her father's letter meant she was going to cry again, and she had done all the crying she was going to do, for now. She dressed in the dark, black wool, her mother's cameo, her father's watch chain looped once around her wrist, because there was no man's coat left in the house to put it in the pocket of, and because it made her feel, for half a second, like someone was walking beside her. She went downstairs. Mrs. Ainsworth was already in the kitchen. The old woman looked up, did not speak, poured a cup of black coffee, set it in front of Rosalind, sat down across from her, and put both her hands on the table, palms up, like a woman offering something. Rosie, Prudence, you have not called me by my name since you were 8 years old. I have not needed to. Mrs. Ainsworth's hands trembled, just once. Whatever you do today, I stand with you. Do you hear me? I hear you. Whatever it costs. I know. Your mother taught me to read. When I was 20, in this kitchen, at this table. I know. She wrote me a letter once, in the middle of the war, when my sister was sick. She wrote it in her own hand, not through her secretary. She said, Prudence, whatever this house asks of you, never let it ask more than you can bear. Mama said that. She did. I am going to ask a lot today. Prudence, ask it. I need you to stand at the top of the staircase during the reading, where everyone can see you, because you are the only person in this house besides me who has been here for 23 years. And when I say something, something they will not believe, I need them to look at your face and know it is true. Mrs. Ainsworth put her hand over Rosalind's. I will stand there. Thank you. Rosie. Yes. Your father, on the last morning, he came into this kitchen. He drank a cup of coffee. He looked at me. He said, Prudence, whatever happens to me, look after her. I said, I will. He said, say it clear. I said, I will look after her. Cornelius, on my name. And then he went out, and he did not come back. Rosalind's eyes closed. You knew. I did not know what he was going to do. I knew something was heavier that morning than any other morning. I did not know what. Rosie. I have carried that morning for 8 weeks. If I had stayed near him, if I had said a word, Prudence. Yes. He chose, Rosie. He chose, not you, not me, not anyone, him. Mrs. Ainsworth's hand stayed on hers. They sat like that until the sun came up. The house filled slow. They came in wagons, in carriages, on horseback, in their Sunday coats and their Sunday hats and their Sunday faces, because Reverend Whitcomb had announced it from the pulpit at 11 o'clock. He had said, there will be a reading of the true will of Cornelius Wexford at the Wexford House. 2 o'clock. All who considered themselves friends of the family are invited to attend. By 1:30, there were 40 carriages in the drive. By 2, there were 70 people in the front parlor and another 30 crowded into the dining room and another 20 standing in the hall. The banker came last. Alistair Crowe walked in with 2 of his men behind him. He wore a black suit and a black hat and gloves the color of pewter, and he took the hat off and he handed it to Mrs. Ainsworth, and he smiled at her, the kind of smile a man smiles at a servant when he expects to own the house by evening. Mrs. Ainsworth did not smile back. She hung the hat on the coat rack, slowly. She did not offer him tea. Rosalind waited until the mantel clock struck 2. Then she came down the stairs. She did not come down alone. Winston came down beside her. Winston, 3 days sober, wearing his best suit, his hair combed, his hands trembling at his sides. He did not know why he had been asked to walk down with her. He had asked her 3 times that morning, and each time she had said, you will know soon. Just walk beside me, please. He was walking beside her. Behind them, 1 step back, came Ezra Blackwood. He wore his canvas coat. He wore his wool hat. He carried no rifle. But everyone in the room, every single person, looked at him and felt the presence of the rifle, the way you feel the presence of thunder before the sky is cracked open. Reverend Whitcomb stood at the fireplace. Josiah Thackeray stood beside him, with a leather folder in his hands, his spectacles polished, his hands finely, for the first time in 8 weeks, not shaking. Rosalind reached the bottom of the stairs. She turned. She looked at the room. She let her eyes travel across every face, slow, deliberate, face by face. Merchant, widow, preacher, farmer, banker, cousin, servant, housekeeper at the top of the stairs, husband 3 steps behind her. She let them wait. Then she spoke. Thank you for coming. The room was silent. My father, Cornelius Wexford, died 8 weeks ago of what the doctor called heart failure, what I called grief, what some of you called convenience. I am sure, because there are men in this room who benefited by his death, and there are men in this room who caused his death. Alistair Crowe's face did not move, but a muscle at the corner of his mouth did. I have with me today 2 documents. One is the last will and testament of Cornelius Wexford, as my father wrote it, in his own hand, not the version his lawyer was compelled to read at the funeral, but the true version, which was locked in his safe, behind a picture of ships, on the wall of his study, which he opened only for my mother, whose combination he shared only with her. Josiah Thackeray opened the leather folder. The second is a set of baptismal records, notarized affidavits, and a signed acknowledgement of paternity, dated 15 years ago, filed with a lawyer in Denver, whose name I will provide to any person here who wishes to verify. She turned to Winston. His face was white. Winston, Rosie, please stand where they can see you. He stepped forward. She took his hand. She held it. She turned back to the room. Winston Wexford is not my cousin. He is my brother. He is my father's son, by a young woman named Elena Marsh, who lived in this house, who worked in this house, who died in this house. In 1856, at the age of 19, giving birth to the boy she loved, and whom my father loved, and whom my father raised in secret, because he was afraid of a man in this room. The parlor did not breathe. Winston's hand shook in hers. She did not let go. My father wrote me a letter on the last night of his life, which I have read, and which I have read, and which I have read, and which I will not publish, because it is between him and me. But I will tell you what it contains, because you deserve to know what Cornelius Wexford carried on his last night and why. She reached into her pocket. She took the letter out. She held it up. She did not open it. My father was blackmailed by Alistair Crowe on the 17th of September. Mr. Crowe threatened, in front of witnesses, to publish the story of Elena Marsh, to ruin her name, to ruin Winston's name, to ruin my mother, and to ruin me, unless my father signed over the water rights to the Western Ranch land, which, if controlled by one man, would give that man the power to shut down every farm south of the ridge, including this town. She lowered the letter. My father did not sign. She looked at Crowe. My father chose instead to leave, so that a man who could no longer be threatened could not be used against his family, because on the morning of his death, he mailed a signed acknowledgement of Winston's paternity to 3 attorneys in 3 cities, which have been on file, ready to be produced, for 8 weeks, since the moment I asked for them. The room made a sound. It was not a sound of talking. It was the sound of 90 people, sucking air through their teeth at the same time. Miss Wexford, Crowe's voice, smooth, careful. This is a very colorful story. It is not a story, Mr. Crowe. You have, forgive me, been under considerable strain. You have lost your father. Your mother is failing. You have contracted an extremely irregular marriage to a man who, Mr. Crowe, yes. Do you deny that you were in my father's study on the 17th of September? I deny nothing of substance. I visited your father frequently on matters of business. Do you deny that you spoke to my father about Elena Marsh? I do not recall the specifics of that conversation. Then let me help you. She turned, half-turned, to Reverend Whitcomb. Reverend, yes, Rosalind. Who was in the room? I was. Who else? Josiah Thackeray. Josiah lifted his eyes. He was pale but steady. I was there. I recorded the meeting, in my professional capacity, in a bound ledger, which I have here today, in which I have signed and dated, in which, under oath, in any court in the territory, I will produce. He held up the ledger. Rosalind turned back to Crowe. Mr. Crowe, there were 2 men in that room besides you and my father, both of whom are standing here today, both of whom will testify, and both of whom have signed and notarized statements, on file in Denver in 3 separate law offices, as of last Tuesday. Crowe smiled. The smile did not reach his eyes. Miss Wexford, this is a family matter, best resolved in a family way. Perhaps if we could speak privately. No. Miss Wexford. No, Mr. Crowe, there is nothing about my family left that is private from this town. I have made sure of it in the last 20 minutes. She lifted the letter again. You threatened my father with ruin. You thought a scandal would break him. It did not. It cost him everything, which is not the same thing. He gave me, in going, what you cannot take from me by threat, because you cannot threaten a person with a truth she is willing to tell herself. She turned to Winston. She squeezed his hand. Winston Wexford is my brother. He is my father's son. He is a Wexford. In every legal sense, in every moral sense, in every sense that matters. He will inherit, according to my father's true will, which will be read by Mr. Thackeray in a moment, a 1/3 share of this estate and of every asset attached to it. Winston's mouth opened. No sound came out. And Alistair Crowe, she turned back. You have nothing to blackmail me with, because everyone in this room now knows what you would have told them on your terms. I have told them on mine. There is no leverage left. Do you understand what I am saying to you, sir? Crowe understood. She could see him understand. She saw the moment in his face when the man who had been feeding on the disasters of this town for 20 years realized that the newest disaster in his path was not a disaster at all. It was a young woman in a black wool dress who had walked out to meet him in the middle of the road without a scandal to be afraid of. He had nothing left. He knew it. His face changed. And it was in that instant, in the small pause between one heartbeat and the next, that he did the last thing he had. He reached into his coat. Ezra moved. He moved faster than a man that size ought to be able to move. He came off the 3rd step of the staircase. He was crossing the parlor floor when Crowe's hand came out of his coat. He was 10 feet away. He was 5. He was not going to make it. He was not going to make it, because someone else got there first. Mrs. Prudence Ainsworth, 70 years old, in her black dress and her white apron, walked down the last 3 stairs of the front staircase, crossed the parlor floor, on feet that had swollen in the last week from standing too many hours, and stepped between Alistair Crowe and Rosalind Wexford. She did not raise her hands. She did not scream. She looked at him, at the small pistol in his hand, at the black eyes above the pistol, at the man she had known since he was 2 days old. Alistair, her voice was steady. Prudence, Peachy Sheen. His voice was not. Put it down. You do not know what she has done. You do not know what she has done to me. Put it down, Alistair. She has ruined me in front of this town. Do you not see what she... Alistair, look at me. He looked. I was in your mother's bedroom when you were born. Do you remember that? I do not know why you would, because you were 2 days old. But I was. I held you. Before your mother did, because your mother was too weak to hold you. And I held you. And I looked at you, and I said, this is going to be a good man, because that is what a woman says when she is holding a 2-day-old boy, because she believes it. Alistair, she believes it every time, about every boy. Do you know why? Prudence. Because we are supposed to be right. His hand shook. The pistol shook. Alistair. Prudence. Your mother would be standing in this room. Don't. Your mother would be standing right here. She would be looking at you, and she would say, Alistair, give the woman the pistol and go home and sit with what you have done until you understand it. Prudence, Fatbush. Give it to me, son. Nobody in the parlor moved. Nobody in the parlor breathed. Because for one long moment, Alistair Crowe, 50 years old, ruined, publicly, financially, in the middle of a room he had thought he owned, was 7 years old, and his mother was long dead. And the only person in the room who had ever been in the room with his mother when she was young was standing 3 feet in front of him in a white apron. He gave her the pistol. She took it. She did not point it. She held it, the way a woman holds a spoon. She stepped back. Ezra Blackwood took Crowe by the arm. He was gentle. He said, quietly, come on now. Blackwood, come on. He walked Crowe out of the parlor. Nobody said anything. The sheriff, who had been standing in the back of the room, and who had been, as many people in the room knew, on Crow's payroll for years, followed, because he did not know what else to do, because the town had just watched, and the town had just seen, and the town was not going to let him stand for Crow, not after this. They took Crow to the jailhouse. The parlor did not clap. It would not have been right. The parlor stood there, 90 people, in their Sunday coats, and they looked at the floor, and they looked at Rosalind, and they looked at the 70-year-old housekeeper with the pistol in her hand, and they understood, slowly, as a room, that the story they had been telling themselves about this family and this banker and this town was not the true story. And that the true story had just been told by a young woman in black wool and her brother and a mountain man and a woman who had held Alistair Crow 2 days after he was born. Delphine Wexford died at 4:10 the next morning. She died the way she had lived, quietly, bravely, in her own bed, in her own house, with her daughter's hand in her right hand and her son's hand in her left, and Ezra Blackwood standing at the foot of the bed, because Delphine had asked him to, because she had said, "Stay, Ezra, stay with them. When I am gone," she had said, "Rosie," and Rosalind had said, "Mama," and Delphine had said, "Winston." And Winston, who had wept for 2 days without stopping, since the reading in the parlor, since the moment his sister had turned to him and given him his name, had said, "Auntie," and Delphine had laughed, faintly, "Not Auntie, not anymore. Say the other word." Winston, and Winston, 31 years old, sober 4 days, had said, "Mama," and Delphine had closed her eyes, and she had smiled, and she had gone. The funeral was on Wednesday. The whole town came. They came in their Sunday coats. They came with hats in their hands. They came the way a town comes when it has understood, too late, that a woman among them was better than they had known. Reverend Whitcomb read the 91st Psalm. Rosalind stood between Winston and Ezra. She did not cry. She had cried in her mother's room, in the last hour, before the sky went gray, and she had cried all the tears her body had. And now she was calm, and she stood on the hill above the town, in her mother's black wool coat, which she had taken from the hall closet that morning, because it was the coat her mother had ridden up Cathedral Ridge in 20 years before, and Rosalind wanted to wear it. On the day her mother went into the ground, they buried her beside Cornelius. The wind came off the ridge. The wind came off the ridge the way it always did. And Rosalind, looking out over the town, saw Cathedral Ridge in the distance, and she thought about the trail up, and she thought about the cabin at the top, and she thought about the man who had come down from it, because a Wexford middle name had been written on a marriage license in a magistrate's office on a November afternoon, and she thought, all right, Mama. I climbed, and I found something to hold on to. The spring came late that year, but it came. The mountain thawed in April. The creek ran full through the western meadow by May. The mill ran 6 days a week from March on, because Muldoon had stayed, and Muldoon had brought his men, and his men had brought their sons, and the Wexford lumber contract with the railroad had been signed. In February, in front of witnesses, in Denver. By July, Rosalind had done 3 things. She had opened the west wing of the mansion, and she had turned it, room by room, into a sanatorium for women, poor, who had tuberculosis, who could not afford the doctor in Denver. She had hired 2 nurses, a doctor, and a young widow to run the kitchen. She had named it, in her mother's hand, Delphine House. She had given Winston, legally, in front of every lawyer she could find, and with his signature, and Ezra's, on the papers, a 1/3 share of the estate. She had made him manager of the mill, under Muldoon's day-to-day operation. She had made him, in every way that mattered, a partner instead of a dependent. And Winston, sober now for almost 6 months, had wept into her shoulder on the day he signed the papers, and he had said, "Rosie, I do not know how to be somebody yet. I do not know how." And she had said, "You have your whole life to learn. Winston, that is what a family is for." And the third thing came slower. Ezra had gone back up the mountain in late March. He had ridden up alone, to close his cabin, to pack what he wanted, and to leave what he did not. He was gone 3 days. He came back on the fourth, with a wagon, and 2 chests, and a saw, and a plane, and a small crate of carving tools that had belonged to his father, and Ash on the wagon seat beside him. He built a workshop. He built it in the old carriage house behind Delphine House. He built it slow, with his own hands, over 5 weeks. He turned the west wall into a set of windows, and he laid a pine floor, and he set up his tools, and by the end of May, he was making furniture. He made a rocking chair for a woman in the sanatorium who had asked for one, because her mother had rocked her in a rocking chair, and she wanted one for the sunroom. He made a small bookcase for Winston, whose room had begun to fill up with books he was reading, slowly, sometimes with his lips moving, because he had never read much before he was 31. He made a desk for Rosalind. He did not tell her. He worked on it in his evenings, when she was in the sanatorium reading to the women. He worked on it on Sunday afternoons, when she was on the porch, writing letters. He worked on it at night, in the workshop, with one lantern, and Ash asleep at his feet. He finished it in early June. He carried it into her study on a Tuesday, when she was in town, and he set it against the window, where her father's old desk had been, which she had asked him 2 weeks before to take out, because she could not sit at it anymore, because every time she sat at it, she saw her father, and her father was not there, and she needed a desk that was hers. She came home at 5. She walked into the study. She stopped. She put her hand on the pine top. She ran her fingers over the joint. She looked at the drawer pulls, which were carved in a pattern of small pear leaves, because her mother had told him once that her daughter had climbed a pear tree at 7 and would not come down. She turned around. Ezra was in the doorway. He was wiping his hands on a rag. He was pretending not to watch. He was watching. "Ezra, yes. You made me a desk." "Yes." "With pear leaves." "Yes." "How did you know about the pear tree?" "Your mother told me." "When?" "The last night, when you left the room to get her water." She was awake. She was awake, Rosalind. She had things she wanted said before she went. Rosalind sat down on the edge of the new desk. She was quiet a long time. "Ezra." "Yes." "The annulment papers." He stiffened, just a little. "Yes. I have them, in the drawer of my father's old desk, in the crate, in the hall." Josiah drew them up. He said, "When I was ready, all I had to do was sign them and send them to Denver, and they would be filed within a week, and you would be, as of that day, a free man, under the terms of our contract." He did not answer. "Ezra." "Yes." "I have not signed them." He looked at her. "I have not signed them because I do not know if you want me to." He did not move. He was standing very still, the way he had stood on the porch on the first morning, when she had woken up, not dead in his snow. "Rosalind." "Yes." "I made you a desk." "You did." "I did not make you a desk to ride back up my mountain and forget the room I made it for." "Ezra." "Rosalind, are you saying—" "I am saying that I owed your mother a debt, and I owed your father a debt, and I owed a boy in a bed 20 years ago a debt, and I have paid all 3, because that is what a man does when he is a man. And now I am standing in the doorway of a study I built a desk for, and I am not paying a debt. Do you understand me? I am not paying a debt anymore. She looked at him. Dad, the June light, coming in through the tall windows, fell on his face, on the beard he had trimmed. Once, in May, because Winston had teased him, on the wool shirt he had begun to wear, because canvas was too hot in June, on the man he was, now that he was not a ghost anymore. Ezra. Yes. Come here. He came. He stopped in front of her. She stood up. She was very small in front of him, because she was small, and he was not. And she reached up and put her hand on the side of his face, and he closed his eyes. Once, the way a horse closes its eyes, when it has finally understood that the hand on it is not going to strike. Ezra. Rosalind, I am not going to sign the papers. Say that again. I am not going to sign the papers. Say it clear. I am not signing the papers, Ezra Blackwood. I am your wife, and you are my husband, and I am going to be your wife for the rest of my life, on paper, and under this roof, and in this room, and in every other way, if you will have me. Rosalind. Yes, you are the stubbornest damn woman I have ever seen. You said that once already. I am going to say it a lot. She laughed. It was the first time she had laughed, all the way. Since her father had died, since her mother had died, since her whole world had turned itself over, in one long November, she laughed. And Ezra Blackwood, who had not laughed in 9 years, laughed too, low, rough, rusty, and then he pulled her against his chest, and he put his chin on the top of her head, and he held her, and he did not let go. Winston stood in the doorway of the study. He was carrying a book he had come to return. He saw them. He backed it out, slow, because he did not want to interrupt. But he was smiling. He was smiling the way a man smiles, when he is watching his sister be loved by a man who deserves to love her. And he thought, this is a family now. This is what a family is. He put the book back on the shelf in the library. He went to find Mrs. Ainsworth. He told her. She smiled, slow, and she said, well, I had been wondering when they would figure that out. And she went into the kitchen and made supper for 4, because that was what she did, on a summer evening, in a house that had come back to life, after nearly dying, on a Sunday afternoon, in a parlor full of neighbors, when a young woman, 23 years old, had walked down her own staircase and had told the truth and had refused to be afraid of it. Winter came again. It came the way it always did on Cathedral Ridge, with a bruised sky and a rising wind and a first hard snow on the 10th of November, exactly 1 year, to the day, after Rosalind Wexford had ridden up a mountain in a burgundy velvet coat and had said, marry me. She sat on the porch of Delphine House that evening, wrapped in her mother's black wool coat, which fit her now as if it had been made for her, because she was her mother's daughter, and her mother had been small too, and the coat had waited for her, in the closet, for 20 years. Ezra sat beside her. He had built the porch, with Winston, in September, when the sanatorium had grown too big for the front veranda, and they had needed a second one. On the west side, facing the ridge, Ash slept between their feet. The dog was old now, older than he looked. He had begun to walk stiff in the mornings, and to sleep in patches of sun, and to lift his head slower when a wagon came up the drive. But he had followed Ezra down the mountain, and he had followed him into a house, and he had stayed, because that was what he had always done. Ezra. Yes. Do you miss it? Miss what? The mountain. He looked out. The ridge stood dark against the November sky. The snow on the top was already halfway down the slope. somewhere up there. His old cabin was buried, his woodpile, the chopping block, the window his brother had looked through as a boy, all of it, sleeping under snow. No, no, I miss the quiet, sometimes, but the quiet is up there, and I know where to find it, if I need it. You could go up in the spring and check on the cabin. I could. We could. He looked at her. We could. I would like to see it. You've seen it. I would like to see it. When I am not frozen to the porch. He almost laughed. Rosalind. Yes. You were not frozen to the porch. I was. You were making a point so that I would let you inside. Ezra Blackwood. Yes. I was really, truly, very cold. I was there, Rosalind. I know what you were doing. She turned her head, she looked at him, and she saw, in the porch light, that he was smiling, all the way he had begun to smile, in the last 6 months, since a summer afternoon, in her study, with a pear-leaf desk, and a decision, and a hand on his cheek. Ezra. Yes, I love you. He did not say it back right away. He never did. He was a man who had lived alone for 9 years, and words had rusted in his throat. But he took her hand, and he brought it up to his mouth, and he pressed her knuckles against his lips, and he held them there, a long time. Then he said, very quietly, I know you do. You know? I know. Ezra Blackwood. Yes. That is not how the sentence ends. Rosalind. Yes. I love you. Better. You are the stubbornest damn woman I have ever known. Better still. He laughed, she laughed. Ash lifted his head, looked at both of them, sighed, and put his head back down. Behind them, through the tall windows of Delphine House, a woman was singing to her small daughter, a woman named Alma, who had come to the sanatorium in March, who had been dying, who was not dying now, because her lungs had healed, and her fever had broken, and she had lived, because a Wexford in a black wool coat had ridden up a mountain 20 years ago and had brought bread and quinine and blankets and a Bible. And because that Wexford's daughter had turned her house into another kind of mountain where women could climb until they found something to hold on to, Rosalind put her head on Ezra Blackwood's shoulder. She closed her eyes. She listened to the singing, to the wind, to the mountain, to the quiet house where her brother was reading, in the library, and Mrs. Ainsworth was setting the table, and a fire was crackling, and a dog was breathing, and the snow was beginning, once again, to fall on Ridgewater. She was 24 years old. She had lost everything, twice, in 1 year, and she had built, in its place, a whole new world, not by herself, never by herself, but she had climbed, and she had found something, and she had held on.